We're going to go on to Chapter 3 now. And again, in finite math, we do a lot of math of finance, where we deal with the financial sector of life, where we have banks and money and borrowing. So there is some vocabulary to work on a little bit. If you're not sure of it, let's just review. When you want to borrow some money, the amount of money you want to receive from the bank, let's say $100, this is considered the principal of your loan. And we use the capital letter P to indicate the principal of the loan. Now, the bank isn't going to give you that money for free. They're going to charge you something so that they can pay interest on things that people keep their money there, and a reason for people to keep their money there, and pay their employees and all the rest. So they're going to charge you a certain percent of the money you borrow as the rate of interest. And then at the end of the time, that interest will be added on to your principal, and that's the amount you pay back to the bank. And of course, we use the letter I for the interest. This is an amount of money. The rate of interest is a percentage of what you're going to be paying. And then T is common, is the time. Now we have a couple of formulas that we're going to start off with. Simple interest rate is your interest, that is the amount of money you're going to pay, depends on the principal, the amount of money you borrowed, the rate at which the bank is going to charge you for using that money, and the period of time that you have your money. So this is simple interest formula. Now, often you're not so much interested in the amount that you have to add to what you've borrowed, but you're interested in the total amount. What will be the total amount you have to pay back? That would be your principal plus the interest. Well, there's a formula for that. And they're describing it in our textbook as Theorem 1. And this is the formula for capital A, which refers to the future value of that loan. What will the future value of that loan be? So it's going to be the principal, the amount that you borrowed, plus the interest, which is what I is. So this is sort of like P plus I. Now in algebra, when we have two letters in two different terms, we can factor out that letter and we get this formula. Then A is equal to this. And this is the one we use, and that's the formula for future value. Now I've set up an example for each one of these. For the simple interest, we're going to take out a loan of $100 for 9 months at an interest rate of 12%. We want to find out what would the interest be. Well, we don't know I, but we know P is 100. Now, what we have to do is convert percent to decimal. We do that by taking away the percent sign, our decimal's there, and moving it 2 to the left. Usually we stick a 0 in there. So 12% becomes 0.12. And we usually put a 0 there to anchor our point. And our time period, since it's all based on a year, which is 12 months, so what part is 9 out of 12? Well, we could reduce this to 3/4 if we want. But again, you're going to use your calculator for this throughout, and the calculator built into your computer. So you just put in there 100 times 0.12 times, now you can convert this to a decimal also, 0.75 times 0.75, or you could have actually done it this way, multiply it by 9, and then divide the whole thing by 12. Again, there's a couple of ways to do it. We'll leave that up to you. And you come up with an answer of $9. So your interest rate, well, the rate was 12%. The interest that you will pay from borrowing that $100 will be $9. So at the end of the year or the end of the 9 months, you have to pay the bank back $109. That's, in a sense, the future amount. Again, all these examples are written up in the textbook, and we are on page, believe it or not, 129 already, because we had skipped some sections we don't cover in Chapter 2. Now for this one, it says find the future amount, future value, for a loan of $800 for 4 months at 9%. So we're just solving for A. We know our principal will be 800, so right there we're going to put our 800. The 1 stays there. Now our rate, we know, is 9% that we're going to convert properly to a decimal. And our time is 4 out of 12 months to make it a year, so that's 1/3. And notice what happens here. I'm going to multiply this. That goes once. And I get that. Again, you're going to just put this in your calculator. You don't have to worry about the math very much. But now, once you figure this out, my advice is then add it to 1. So it then becomes this. You multiply this by 800, and you end up with the future amount that you'd have to pay at the end of 4 months is $824. Now again, as you practice on these, you'll become somewhat familiar with these formulas. And in Math Zone, we do have a formula sheet for Chapter 3 that lists all of these formulas that you can actually use on your test. As we continue, example 2, they're asking us kind of an interesting question. They often ask this type of question in Chapter 3. Here, a relative is borrowing $1,000 at a very good rate of 4%. And the parent or whoever's loaning the money says, well, pay this back whenever you can. So if they kept the money for 1 year, or 2 years, or 5 years, or 10 years, what would be the future value of that $1,000 that they would have to pay back? I know when I gave my kids loans, I wouldn't charge them any interest at all. And then sometimes I forgave the loan anyway. But this is a problem they're asking. So your future amount equation would be your principal is this, your rate is that, and the time is 1. And for this one, we'll change the time to 2, the time to 5, and the time to 10. Well, if we multiply that, we get this. Multiply this by 1,000, we get that. So after 1 year, it would be this. After 2 years, we multiply this by 1,000, would be 1,080. After 5 years, the interest is now building up. This would be 20%, and plus the 1 makes it 1.20. Multiply it by 1,000, and you get 1,200. And after 10 years, at 4%, this part of the equation becomes 1.40, and this is $400, 1,400. Theoretically, all you need to do, since you're multiplying it by 1,000, is just move the decimal place over 3 places in each of these answers, by the way. So this was a very easy one. The numbers were nice and clean, but again, the kind of example they expect you to be able to do. We're going to continue our work on Chapter 3, Section 1, Simple Interest. And keep in mind, we reviewed these basic formulas. Interest equals principal times rate times time. And this is current amount equals principal times this in parentheses. We showed that earlier. Now, for present value, our question that we want to find here is, what would be the initial principal so that after a period of 9 months, at a rate of 10% interest, we would end up with $5,000. So again, you're going to use this particular formula, and we start to fill it in. Now we know this is going to be 5,000. We don't know the P. This is 1. Now we know our rate is 10% that we need to convert to a decimal. And our time is 9 months, but in this formula it's years. So we have to convert 9 months into years. So that would be 3/4. And it's nice if it's in a decimal form, and that is equal to 0.75. So we're going to put this 0 into our formula, and we're going to multiply 0.10 times that and add 1 to it. Now for this we have our trusty calculator. So let's see here, 0.10 times 0.75, and I'm going to add the 1 to it, so it becomes 1.075, like so. Now we still have our 5,000 here. So this is our equation. Now we want to solve for this letter P. So our strategy will be to divide both sides by in a sense, the factor of P, which is this, 1.075. 1.075. Now these cancel out, and I'm left with P equals this. Well, if I put that into my calculator, I get $4,651.16. So our answer statement is, after 9 months, invested at 10%, if I have this principal, I will yield $5,000. Now again, you're going to have many examples that as you work in the practice, and then later the quiz me, to see if in fact you've mastered this skill. In our next example, we're being introduced to what are called Treasury Bills. Treasury Bills are notes that are sold by the government to help pay the government's bills. They're often referred to as T-notes. So here we have a face value of the Treasury bill of $10,000. And our principal, the amount that we put in, is this, and it's usually in days, 180 days. And what we don't know is the rate that will give us this face value. So we pay less for it, but this is what the government gives us back after this amount of time. So we're still going to use the present amount formula, in which our A is 10,000, our principal is this, and then the rest of the formula is 1 plus, this is the time. 180 days over 360 for a full year is 0.5, or 1/2 of a year. We don't know our rate. So we solve it by multiplying this by each of these terms in the parenthesis to get the R out by itself. Now, what we do is we subtract this from both sides. So over here, we're going to subtract that. When we do this, it becomes this, and this then equals that. And we want to solve for the letter R. Well, now what we're going to do is divide whatever is with the R. And again, our calculators are very valuable here. This cancels out, and we're left with R. And when we put that in our calculator, we get R equals 0.02147, and we need to convert this R to a percentage now. So we take our decimal point, move it 2 places to the right, where this then becomes 2.147%. And that's what our rate is. So many of these problems, they're going to give you portions of it, and you have to find some letter of it. In some cases, it might be time. Other cases, it would be the rate, as in this. And in other cases, the principal and the amount. So this is what we're showing you. All right, example 4 is a problem in 2 parts. We'll do the first part first, then we'll do the second part. Now, I'm going to buy a car, and the car costs $3,500. It's a used car. And I want to take a note out on this car, and the note will be for 270 days. That is, after 270 days, I'm going to pay all of this back, and the rate per year is 10%. So what will I have to pay back? And again, this is part A of the problem, so we'll do this part first. So I'm looking then for that current amount in the future, current value of this after this amount of time. So it would be A equals my principal of $3,500 times 1, which is in the formula, and my percent is 10% that I can put as something like that, and then this is going to be times 27 over 360. Now I'm going to multiply this, add 1 to it, and then multiply this times that, and this is all in the book, and eventually I end up with $3,762.50. Now remember, you want to do this in your calculator, add 1 to it, then multiply it by this. So this is what I would have to pay after 270 days. But I find that I have to do something. And what the book is telling us is that 60 days later, you find that you need the money and sell the note to a third party for $300, or I should say $3,550. Here's the question they ask. What annual interest rate will the third party receive from this investment? So now you've changed it from what it was originally. This is going to be part B. And we'll show you the figuring of this in just a moment. Okay, for this, we're going to go back to one of our earlier formulas in which we said the A, which is that future amount, is equal to the principal plus the principal times the rate times the time. That we then factored out the P and got this formula that we use very frequently. But now what we want is from this formula to solve for the rate. So what I'm going to do is distribute this back and get this, because I want to isolate the rate. So I take the P, transpose it, on this side it becomes a negative P, and then I've isolated what I want. Then I'm going to divide both sides by PT. Here the P's cancel out, the T's cancel out, so I'm left with the R, and I get rate equals this. So this is the formula I'm going to be using here, because I have my original amount, which I got right here. I'm going to subtract it from what I sold it from. Remember, I sold that T note for this. And then I'm going to divide it by, again, my original, well, my principal at that time. And notice it was 60 days later. So I had to subtract 60 from the 270, and I get 210. That's my time. Now again, I would suggest you do this, get an answer, then take this, multiply it by the 210, then divide it by the 360. And if you can keep these answers in there, and then take this number divided by this, and that gets a little tricky, lots of stuff going on, and you end up with this rate. But remember, this is in decimal form. We want a percentage. So you move your decimal place over 2 places, and this becomes 10.262%. And you're going to find as you do the calculating in chapter 3 they'll often want you to do something to 3 decimal points. So here we ended up with 5, but to change it to a percent, we had to move it over 2. That gave us our 2 decimal points. And MATLAB is critical, so you have to keep your, before you round off, keep your decimals, and then at the end, do your rounding off. Okay, this next one is rather tedious, and let's go through it step by step. When you get older, or maybe some of you have done it already, you may want to go into the stock market. Dow Jones and stocks and bonds and all that stuff. Well, this one has to do with interest on an investment. Now, you have some money, and you're going to buy some shares, and let's say IBM or AT&T or Apple or any of the companies, or even a mutual fund maybe, and each share costs $47.52 at the time you're buying it. So you tell your broker, the person who deals with this, buy this. So he buys 50 shares at that current price, and the total investment then is, that's what you have paid in hard cash. Now, at an investment company, they have charges. They don't do it for free. So in this table over here, that's in your book, it's called Table 1. If the principal is between 0 and $2,499, you pay a flat rate of $29 plus 1.6% of the principal. And that would be your what it costs in a sense. So there's your investment. They charge this, and you're paying 1.6% of that amount, and that comes to $67.02. So this is what you paid for these 50 shares of stock at the time. Now, after 200 days, you decide you're going to sell this stock. And you look in the paper, the Wall Street Journal and others, Financial Times, and you find that the price of the stock has gone from $47.52 to $52.19. The price of stock has gone up. So you tell your broker, sell. So he sells it for this particular price right here. And now this is, in a sense, a new principal. But when you sell stock, you have to subtract the costs then of the commission. So you get to where your stock is between $2,500 and $9,900. You're paying a flat fee of $49. And now, since it's more money, the rate has gone from 1.6 to 0.8%. So when I figured that out, by the way, it came to this amount, that when you sell the stock, you have to pay that. So this is what they're going to give you in hard cash, or a check. So you started off with this, you end up with this. What is the percent of interest, in a sense, you got in this investment? Well, our new amount is right here. This is what we get back after 200 days. This is what we paid originally, up over here. And we're using, again, this formula. And it's 200 days later, out of 360 in a year. We don't know what our rate is. So we distribute, like we did, got this. Now multiply this by that, just using your calculator, and I got this R. Again, I want to isolate the R, so I subtract this amount from both sides. I get $96.60. I then divide both sides by this. These cancel out, and I end up with 0.07117. And they do say to round off to 3 places. So I convert this to a percent by moving the decimal over 2 places. And this gives me let's take that off of here, 7.117% is my rate. That's not too bad, because to get 7% in today's market, well, in stocks that's okay. But in interest rate, you don't get this kind of interest rate. So again, this is on page 30. Actually, it's 30, on page 30 in our textbook. And you can look online to see this. There is a third line to our table. It's only 0.3% for money more than that. And hopefully later in your life, you'll be able to buy stocks and make some of this money. This wraps up topic 1.